Yes. It's steel.
But you can't be any geek off the street. Gotta be handy with the steel, if you know what I mean.
Keep it real.
Keeping it real.
Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Steven and this is Steel Keeping It Real. So, this particular day, I'm kind of going to do a rant. You know, there has been certain things that have been out there talking about Gen X kids, which is what I am. I was a preteen in the 70s and I was a teenager in the 80s. And we were feral and we were a lot more resistant. Now, one of the first things that comes to my mind is like back when I was 4, maybe even younger, I fell out of a car while I was moving. I think the car that we had was a Caprice Classic. And, you know, back in the day, you didn't have to wear seat belts if the car had seat belts, number one. We didn't have child locks on the doors, and we didn't have the window that only went down halfway. The windows that we had back in the day went down all the way. You also had it to where, you know, if you had space in the back or whatever, you know, of the car, you could lay in the back window or be in the back of a station wagon. You can't do that anymore. When we decided to move from California to Alaska, my stepfather decided, okay, well, we don't have enough money to fly there or anything else like that, but the military would pay for certain things, but not a lot of things. And so what ended up happening is he went out and bought a 4-wheel drive and he put a camper shell on it, and then he drilled a hole from the cab of the truck to the back where the camper shell was, made a little wooden table or chair set in the back, and then he decided to just give us all sleeping bags. At the time, there was 3 of us, me, my brother, older brother, and my stepsister. He put us all in the back with sleeping bags and then drove to Alaska. The only heat that we had was generated by ourselves or what little came through that little hole that he drilled in the cab back to us, thinking that was going to be sufficient. No, it was not. We froze our asses off, and that's another reason of saying we were a lot more resilient. Now, when you got into trouble, and we did a lot of dirt back in the day, when you got in trouble, a parent who found you doing something, if you got caught, would hit you or beat you and then walk you home like this and then take you home where you got beat again. And I'll tell you this, you didn't do that again, you know, because it seemed like as opposed to cameras nowadays, you know, parents did watch out for each other. Maybe that's me because I was a military brat, but parents did watch out for other kids' parents. Now, we had to learn how to fend for ourselves. We had to learn to cook and clean, you know, by ourselves because both of our parents would be working. You know, we were all latchkey kids, a lot of the kids that I knew. So, you know, we had to learn to cook at a younger age, which also meant that if you had siblings, somebody was in charge during that time frame. And so I have an older brother that's less than 3 years older than me, so he was always in charge, and then it would hardly ever be me because until I had a little brother and sister. That's when, you know, I actually got some power in my house. If you're like the middle kid, you understand what I'm saying. And so we did have to cook at an early age. And I remember a story, and I'm only telling it to add a little bit of, you know, context to what is going on. There was a time in like 1977, 78, we're left home. My mom was working for some computer company, and my stepfather was in the military, and we all had to cook. And we were cooking, and all we were making was hot dogs, you know? Because, you know, back in the day, everybody was like poor, you know, in your neighborhood. You know, you lived among people with basically the same income as you. So we're cooking hot dogs, and my stepsister spills the pot over onto her stomach, and then it burns her stomach, and she starts rubbing it as you would if you got burned, and she burned off like the top layer of her skin. And you know what? I don't even remember, you know, going to the hospital about that. She might have, but you know, hospital visits were, you know, few and far between. It had to be an extreme emergency back in the day for you to go to the hospital. I know I went to the hospital because I had tubes in my ears. I had to get my tonsils taken out. That's younger days. And because we were military, every time we moved, especially when we moved over to the UK, you had to get your shots. And so at that particular time frame, your mother had your shot records everywhere you went, like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse.
Roadhouse.
She just pull those things out and go like, well, Doc, he's already had this, you know, because you get into another situation, it's Doc like, well, we need to just go ahead and give him a shot. Well, Doc, I see he's already got this shot, and he's got that shot, and he's got that shot, so it can't be that. So, you know, what other shot are you going to give him? And I remember it was 1979. And there was a situation, I remember it's the year that Superman came out, so it might be 78, 79. And my older brother was getting into a word fight with somebody else. And I'm going to mention a name only because of the fact that I'm sure the statute of limitations is gone, and I'm sure this particular person doesn't follow me, but it is what it is. His name was Martin Sloan, and he lived where we lived in New Mexico on Holloman Air Force Base. And they were getting into a word fight, and I happened to be around there, and I don't know what I was doing, but it was within earshot. And then let's get this also in context. This is after Roots came out, just soon after Roots came out. So, you know, there was a lot of anger amongst certain people towards certain other people of color, and it could be either or, you know, white versus black or black versus white. So my brother is having this word fight with this guy, and Martin goes like, well, you ain't nothing but a dirty digger. And he said the word, and all of a sudden I went bing, and I ran over and I started pummeling this guy. Well, this guy had a dog, and the dog did what it's supposed to do and protect his master, and the dog bit me. And so I had to go get a tetanus shot. And I remember we were supposed to go see Superman, and we didn't that night because I was getting a tetanus shot. So that was another addition to my shot records. So then fast forward it to like 1983, and you know, the military is all about labor. That's basically, if you're not out there fighting somewhere, then you're working on something on the base. And when it was like 1983, I got a job, you know, working around the base, but the job was filling sandbags. And this is when I lived in England. So the job was filling sandbags and laying concertina wire around the base. Now, if you know anything about concertina wire, it is very sharp. So there was a particular instance where a bunch of us fell into the concertina wire, and so the people that were in charge said, like, we got to take these kids to the hospital. So they took us all to the hospital because we had to get tetanus shots. But guess what? I didn't, because I had just gotten bit in 1978, and a tetanus shot lasts for 7 years. So I was the only kid that like sorry about you motherfuckers, but I already got my tetanus shot. So that was what happened then. Now, we got into also lots of fights, but they were always epic fights. And that one was an epic fight. Oh, I meant to tell you, a year later, me and this same kid got into an argument again, and the dog bit me again. The same dog bit me again. So, I don't think I ever owned a dog for the rest of my life, because I was like, you disloyal. Well, he wasn't disloyal. I can't blame another dog. His dog was doing what he was supposed to do and protect his master. But we fought a lot, and I remember there was a time frame, and this would have been New Mexico. I'm almost going through chronologically of where I was for each particular story. We were living in New Mexico, and I had a very, very abusive stepfather. And so he happened to be away, and me and my older brother get into a fight, and we're throwing each other around the house. Well, this particular house that we lived in on base actually had plain glass, as like there's the door, and on either side are like two plain glass panels, like windows that made it look beautiful, and you got plenty of sunshine in the house. So me and him are fighting, and I end up throwing him through one of the plate glass windows. And now he looks like, he's got so much glass in his head, he looks like Rick James, after a concert, with all the stuff in his hair. And I remember my mother came home, and she went, mothers didn't panic like that. My mother instantly called somebody who, before the end of the day was done, had a new plain glass window on there, and my stepfather was none the wiser, because had he known, we would have got seriously beat about that. When you're in that age, when you're in that era, you do a lot of stuff. I mean, I had, because skateboarding became really, really popular in the late 70s, I had a couple of skateboards, and I had some roller skates, and that's when I tell the story of when I learned about physics. Now, I had these pair of roller skates that looked like tennis shoes, and I remember one time I took the skates off of the bottom of the shoes, and I actually wore those shoes to school one day, and then it rained, not realizing, hey, you got holes in the bottom of your shoes, because that's where the screws went in to keep the skates in, and my feet ended up getting wet. There was one time I was wearing those skates and trying to kick a football in skates off of a football tee. Now, again, I learned physics because I learned what opposites that are in motion stay in motion, and gravity, because I went to go back with my foot and kick that ball, and the roller skates rolled, and next thing you know, I'm falling backwards, and I cracked my head open. Well, not cracked my head open, I fell and hit my head. Now, I could have had a concussion, but there was no such thing as concussion protocol back in the day. You just shake it off and go about your day. There's also parents didn't care what we watched on television. We could watch anything if they were in control of the television. Like Saturday mornings when we watched cartoons, we could watch it all day long until sports started to come on around the cartoons started to get lame around 11, 12 o'clock. That's when they started showing things like the Pink Panther. But after around 12 or 1 o'clock, if you had a parent that was into sports, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, whatever, around 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock is when you stopped, and you met everybody outside and you all played. The parenting was different. You always had, your mother was always on your side. Your dad or your stepfather, in my situation, they led with the rod, and so to speak. And, when you're stuck watching TV, what they watch, you're watching these shows like 8 is Enough, Family, The Waltons, where you're seeing very caring fathers, and you're like, what the fuck? Aren't you guys, you're making me watch this. Why aren't you taking any examples or any cues from this about how to be a parent? Evidently, my stepfather, no. He was just a dick. Oh, also, when I lived in the UK, and this is what really threw me about how parents don't care what we watch, because the sensibilities in the UK are definitely different than they are here in the United States. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden a movie called Carry On Abroad, I think it was, came on, and that would have made me about 10 or 11 when I'm watching this show that's removed to England in 1984, and I'm watching this, and all of a sudden I see titties, and I look around like this, like, does anybody else see this? And is anybody going to change the channel? And nobody did. And I continue to watch. And I think I watched about 8 Carry On movies when I lived in the UK. But they were basically just funny movies. And, you know, all of a sudden they throw in a titty here and there. And that would be about it. Also, you know, kids nowadays have these cell phones. But, you know, if you were to ask a kid, what's your mother's phone number? They couldn't tell you. They'd have to go to their cell phone and go this. When we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, we knew all of our friends' phone numbers, our friends' friends, our grandparents, or whatever. We knew all their numbers by heart. To this day, I can remember the phone number of my house that we lived in 1984. It would have been 303-528-1008. Problem is that in 1988, they changed the area code to 719, so if I were to call up that number now, I'd be calling up Denver, Colorado, not Colorado Springs, Colorado. So, there goes that. Go to your room and think about what you've done. Takes on a new meaning, because nowadays kids go to their rooms and they got their stereo or whatever music player, they got their phone, they got their computer, they got a TV, they got their Xbox or whatever. You know, when we went to our room, we might have had a record player or a radio. That was about it. We really, and they better not hear anything coming out of that room at all. So we couldn't listen to the radio. Nowadays, a parent has to, you know, become a mover if they really want to discipline their kid. So they gotta like take the Xbox or the PlayStation or whatever and take the plug to the TV so they can't turn it on, and, you know, take their phone or, you know, change the Wi-Fi password so they can't do anything on their phone. You know, it's like a mission impossible to try to discipline a kid nowadays. And then always they'll find something. Some kid will find something to, you know, work their way around the system, you know, wait until the parents come home, because the kids always knew how to undo if your parent was, you know, good enough to put a parental lock on the TV, they could figure out the password in a heartbeat. It was no problem. And, you know, it's like Mission Impossible. You know, I mentioned earlier about, you know, watching Saturday morning cartoons, but there was another ritual that went on, you know, when watching Saturday morning cartoons. And this kind of references the fact that my stepfather was a very abusive person, you know, used to like to, you know, beat up on me, but he didn't realize that there was something that was happening that he really, you know, had no control over. So if you are anything like me, you watch Saturday morning cartoons and you got almost like the biggest bowl. Sometimes it was like a salad bowl that, you know, mom would mix the salad to dish out to everybody. You had just that one bowl and a big bowl of cereal and some milk, and it was something you did like every single Saturday. Well, back in the day, they always had these commercials like, you know, I'm drinking milk now.
I know I should drink milk because it'll help me grow up big and strong. Milk's got stuff that's good for my bones and stuff that's good for my muscles.
So So I watched a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, so which means I was drinking lots of milk, which means when in 1986, I beat up my stepfather. You know, because, you know, I had enough of it and everything else like that. And plus, since he had been beating on me, you know, and challenging me the whole time when I was a kid, he didn't realize he was training me for his own ass whipping. Because, you know, he was doing all that, and I was drinking milk. I should have a montage scene right now of me like Rocky getting ready, because when that day came, I was like, you know what, it's on. It's on. You wanted to, you know, you think you're big and bad. You ain't nothing. You know. And next thing you know, he's on his back. If you can relate to any of this, maybe not the abuse or anything like that, but if you can relate, that is absolutely great. If you can't, then just realize you definitely know that you're not a Gen X kid. So, I thank you all for stopping by. I want you guys to like the videos as much as I like making them for you. After that, all you need to do to help me out with the channel is to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Peace.